All right. Genesis chapter 11, verse 3. Vayomu ish elehu havah nilbana levenihim v'nisrefa lisrefa. So they said, ish elehu. So literally that means a man unto his fellow or unto his neighbor, like his friend. It could even mean a reya. But this is idiomatic. It means everyone to one another, right? A person to his fellow, or one to one another. What did they say? Havah nilbana levenim. Havah, that's the same as in havah nagila, right? Havah nagila, havah, right? So it's the same havah. Let's do it. Come on. Nilbana levenim. Literally this says, let's brick bricks. So the word brick has been made into a verb here. Yeah, the liban in the PL, so it's kind of funny. And it's a cohortative, so there's like a little exclamation point on there if you want to, without getting too much into Hebrew grammar. This guy here, at the end, the hey, some grammarians call it an emphatic hey. And for those of you learning Hebrew who haven't learned to read yet, we have a class starting this Tuesday, by the way, so don't miss it. The class is going to be Tuesday nights at 9:45 p.m. GMT plus 8. So that's Filipino time, Singapore time, etc., which is 8:45 Eastern Standard Time. So New York, Virginia, Florida, those types of areas in the United States, and whatever it is, GMT, London time, whatever that is. So I guess -8, 1:45 p.m. in London and those types of areas. So this might be the last time for a long time that I teach beginners Hebrew, the Bereshit class we call it, because hopefully these students will progress and become Shemot level, intermediate, and then my current Shemot 2 students will be progressing not too far out to be Vayikra class, which would be advanced. And so I'll kind of have my hands full with the advanced and intermediate students of the future. So if you want to study beginner's Hebrew with me, that's starting this Tuesday, and this will probably be the last time I teach it for some time. Could be a couple of years until I do it again, I'm not sure. And yeah, part of that is it's much more interesting for me also to teach advanced topics, advanced and intermediate. You know, I feel I can learn from the students too, right? We teach each other. They notice things maybe I missed when we were going through the scripture. But if you're curious about what the future holds, talk to some of our Shemot students. We weekly get into the text, into the Torah portion. We're not just going through grammar books and stuff. This is actually wrestling with the text already at the intermediate level. So anyway, if you haven't learned the Aleph Bet yet, how to read, this week's letter is the letter Hey, which you see I've colored for you here in blue. Right there it is in blue. So, or what is that? Teal? Yeah, it's blue, like a light blue, I guess. So please learn this letter. This letter makes an H sound. Hey, ha. That is our letter of the week. So if you watch the videos, this drosh will have been brought to you by the letter Hey. So when you see that at the end of a verb, sometimes this is what we call the emphatic Hey. So it's like a little exclamation point at the end of the word. And someone asked this week, what does Hey represent? Is it grace? Like a lot of times in the Goyim community, the Goyish community, they say that Hey, the number 5 rather, this is number 5 in Hebrew, that it means grace. But I was thinking about it, but really in Hebrew it means law. It's the law. Like I don't know if you remember a few Torah portions back, the Masorah had a miniature Hey in one of the words. And Rashi interpreted this from the Midrash to mean that by means of the Torah, God created everything. And then we got a bit deeper and we saw that in the Aramaic translations, we were told that by means of his memra, the word, he created those things. And so they were created is what the Hebram is what the original word was. But the Hey was a miniature Hey to draw attention to it. And Rashi enumerates that the Hey, since it's a number 5, it stands for the 5 books of the law, the 5 books of the Torah. So I think it's more fitting if we're talking about a hey, rather than grace, really it's the Torah. But if you've ever read Mishley 31, Proverbs 31, and you've read about the Hebrew eyshet Chayil, the woman of valor, right? Like we sing sometimes on Shabbat, eyshet Chayil mi yimsa merachok mipeninim michra patach bale ba'ala v'shalalo tochal. Anyway, so this eyshet Chayil, we're told in that proverb, in that mashal, Hebrew mashal, that she has the torat-chesed al leshonah, that the Torah of chesed is on her tongue. That is the Torah of grace, or the Torah of kindness, the law of kindness. And so, from the Jewish culture, the view of the law is very different than it became for those who are from the Roman Catholic tradition or the Protestant Catholic tradition. The two are not an ends. The law is not opposed to grace. The law incorporates grace. Adonai, we're told one of his attributes is that he is El Rachamim, he is the merciful God, and he desires to impart grace, or loving kindness, or clan loyalty to those who are members of his family. Continuing on, so let us brick bricks. Let's make levanim, bricks. Now this is interesting. We're talking about probably the Tower of Babel was a ziggurat, right? This kind of like pseudo-pyramid type structure, like a step pyramid, some would call it, that were made in ancient times. Also, there's some commenters who believe that later on, when Yaakov Avinu, when our father Jacob has the dream, oftentimes called, it's the Silum Yaakov, right? The Jacob's ladder, that Silum is a weird word, right? And so they say ladder, some say stairs, some think it's actually a ziggurat, right? So that this was kind of a common expression, a metaphor, a building as a metaphor for reaching out to the gods, or reaching out to Elohim, right? The divine beings, the divine powers. Someone write something in the chat so I know that you're all with me and not just everybody in the kitchen making popcorn or something. So here we have this comment, this is interesting, about the Akkadian language. So the Hebrew expression, literally, to brick a brick, is found again only in Exodus 5:8, right, when we are slaves in Egypt. And it says, and the Akkadian phrase is labanu libittu. So the Hebrew is actually mimicking the building expression that was used in Akkadian by those ancient builders. Very interesting, or at least later, not pre-Babel, but after the languages get mixed, and we end up with Akkadian. Daniel says, "Yum, popcorn." All right, let's continue. On this phrase, milbana levanim, Sarna comments, Akkadian building inscriptions, which hail the achievements of the great kings, repeatedly emphasize the making of bricks, levanim. Indeed, the molding of the first brick was regarded as an important rite and was accompanied by elaborate ceremony. So in these architectural digs, they found that many of those kings, they got their name. There'd be a big brick that was more prominent than the others. In Hebrew, we might call this rosh pinah, like the chief stone, right? The most important brick, and it would have the name of the king who built this connection to the gods, right? Connecting to the heavens, to Shemayim. Because for ancient peoples, Shemayim, sky, and heavens, there wasn't necessarily something distinguishing it. Tet says, lavan is brick, but I thought lavan is white. So the vowels are different, right? So lavan, you're right, does mean white. And the words are related, just like we get halvanon, the white place, when we refer to Lebanon, right? Probably because it has mountain peaks that would be covered with snow from time to time. Just like in northern Israel, you sometimes get snow, right? So yeah, you have lots of derivatives. There's even a kind of cheese, lebna, right? Which it's like a white cheese, which is delicious. Anyway, lebna, it also comes from, I don't know how you describe it, kind of like a strong, tart sour cream. No, not even sour cream. Cream cheese, maybe? It's kind of like cream cheese. Yeah, so so you have lots of derivatives. That's a very astute observation, Ted. Thanks for mentioning that. that says that may be where chief cornerstone came from. It's possible, right? It's possible. Yeah, it just occurred to me while talking to you about it now, that king stone was like the most important one, right? And if we're talking about Yeshua HaMashiach being the chief cornerstone, well, that's where the king's name was, right? And we consider him to be our king. He's the king of the Jews, correct? Someone comments to me in private. So please note, if you send a note to the presenter, I will interpret that as private, that you don't want people to know who you are. So this person writes, why do you think nowadays Torah is so much separated from grace? My opinion, get ready. So it's the wicked history from the early church fathers and their anti-Semitism, basically. So you have, if you study the writings of the church fathers, we have kind of a progression towards anti-Semitism that takes place, as you have fewer and fewer Jews that are part of running things, that are included in the decisions. And so, for example, there's even early issues between the Eastern Church, which schedules their Easter holiday to be on Passover, right? They schedule it to be on Passover. There's an understanding that it should coincide with Passover. The Bishop of Rome, who had broken away to start his own thing, he wanted to be the boss and have his own church there. This is the Roman Catholic Church broke away from the Eastern Church. So the Eastern Church is older, and the Roman Catholic Church had their own schism, their own protesting moment, right? And the Bishop of Rome, one of his excuses was, your practices are polluted with Jewish relics from the law. Meaning, for example, the Greek word for quote-unquote Easter is pascha. That's how you say it in Greek. Well, pascha, what is that in Hebrew? Pesach. It's Passover. So the plan in the apostolic writings, in the oldest copies we have in the Greek, the way that they called the Christian holiday of Easter was Passover. You see, this is more added to Passover. It wasn't seen as a separate holiday linguistically. Over time, anti-Semitism pushes away from the law, and then we end up with the Protestant Reformation, where there were some guys in the beginning that were really mensches, right? Really good guys. You know, like John Wycliffe, he's trying to translate the Bible. He became a martyr. He's trying to translate it so that the people could understand, right? Or Jon Huss, he translates part of the Bible into German, and his people loved it. He was a Catholic priest, but he was burned at the stake by the bishop for translating the Bible. The bishop held that it should only be in Latin, not in the tongue that the people can understand, right? You can see this is the devil at work, right? So then the later reformers, it was hijacked by the devil. The devil stirred up his servant, Martin Luther. And Martin Luther hijacked some of the previous teachings and then added his own stuff and murdered many Jews and murdered Anabaptists, anybody who disagreed with him, and did all kinds of perverse things. The consummation of his bride was witnessed by many people in the same room. They had to watch while if you've ever read or looked at any of Luther's writings in the original German, filled with curse words, swear words that no preacher today could maintain his job if he wrote such filthy things. And so this is the spirit that permeated the church for centuries, right? Protestantism had its own disgusting perversions, right? And so did the Roman Catholic Church. So when I'm saying these things, I'm not saying that our brothers who are Protestants today that are, someone asked me this week, one of our members, that they heard some teachers saying that the Protestant churches were satanic churches. I don't think so. I wouldn't go that far. Although the devil definitely tried to get a hold on things. When the Reformation is happening already, right? You've got these martyrs who died for translating the Bible. Several decades later, you can kind of imagine the Nachash, the devil. He says, I better get a hold of this thing. Otherwise, people are going to be free, and they're going to learn the truth. And so what's he do? He infiltrates Martin Luther, and he makes him his servant, right? As well as many of the other reformers who had people murdered, burned at the stake, etc., etc. You're not really, quote unquote, forgiving people, So that's I hope that's kind of a long-winded answer, but I hope that answers a little bit what happened. So you can understand when there's anti-Semitism in the body, then one of the logical things you will do is you'll pit grace against law, right? In Colossians, there's a verse that I translated for you guys in a drosh sometime back. I think Brother Yehoshua asked about it. And so we put it up in the Greek, and then I explained to you. Many translations, it's talking about the Sabbath and the holidays, and they'll say these are just a shadow of the things to be, like a shadow of Christ. They'll say like something like this, right? Or only a shadow. And I showed you guys that the word just or only is not in the Greek. And it really changes the feeling, doesn't it? So what's happening here is many Protestant translators, maybe they really love God and they're really searching for the truth, but they still have this spiritual baggage of their father, the wicked Martin Luther, Yimach Shemo, right? So they have this guy and his theology and it's been passed down. It's their tradition, which is very funny because oftentimes Jews who believe in the Messiah, or those of you who have joined our culture and who follow the Messiah, are accused of quote unquote legalism, right? But legalism does not mean obeying God's law. Legalism is really about thinking you got some works righteousness coming your way, right? By doing things a certain way. And so they have kind of a reverse legalism by making sure to not do his law, to persecute anyone who does his law, right? Jews who converted to a Protestant denomination are usually very harassed to make sure, at least in the past, there's been kind of a lifting of this in the last couple of decades with the resurgence of Messianic Judaism, and people are more accepting and understanding. So there's some reforming that's happening in the Protestant circles. But so I think it's wrong to say that those are satanic churches. That's kind of crazy talk. But to say that the devil has been involved at their start, at the get-go, that's totally accurate. Totally accurate. He hijacked the movement. So hope that answers your question a little bit. Okay, let's see. There's right. So the same person asks, are we contending against spirit of... Okay, spirit of... Well, I would just say that, I think I know what you're asking. So I would just say that our brothers and sisters who are in various Protestant movements, I view them, there's this halakhic principle, there's a rabbinical principle of, for example, if a Jew is raised by liberal Jews, if he's raised by secular parents who don't care about the Torah, then there's a different judgment for that person than someone who's raised religiously and knows better than to eat pork, for example, or do something against God, right? So the concept is called kidnapped since birth, right? And the sages, they apply it also metaphorically to various individuals. And so this is kind of how I view our Gentile friends who are in various denominations that are very anti-Torah. I think that they are kidnapped since birth, right? So I think that the judgment for them is different than it would be once people have learned about Torah, right? So we're told that God judges us according to our knowledge, right? And so he's a just God, and he doesn't want anyone to perish. So I think that's really what's happening. So when we share Torah with them, we have to, it's best to be understanding and sympathetic that their eyes have been covered, right? Through these centuries of Gentile tradition from wicked leaders. Not today, I'm not saying their pastors are wicked, but, Martin Luther and on down, okay? Let's see. Dr. DeVera says, was it Constantine who divorced the church from its Jewish origins? The divorce had already begun before Constantine. It had already begun. And it happens on two sides. So Judaism is partly responsible as well, right? So the Gentiles trying to convert more Jews to Christianity caused a backlash in Judaism, right? So the Gentiles were more familiar with Greek, and so they like to use the Septuagint, which is a Jewish translation, but it's Greek. And they leaned into the fact that Jews believed in binitarianism, right? So it's a natural extension to go to trinitarianism, or a triune God concept, right? And so what happens is the flavor of Judaism that survives from the destruction of the temple pushes hard on Hebrew and Aramaic only, right? So they stopped using the Septuagint soon after, right? Because this was something Gentiles knew, right? And so they stopped using it. And so that kind of made the communication harder between unbelieving Jews and the, quote-unquote Christendom, right? And then the other thing that happened is on the Jewish side, when the Bar Kokhba revolt began, until this time, Messianic Jews still went to synagogue, they went to normal synagogues. Oftentimes they didn't have their own congregations, right? And then they would have kind of like a house meeting, like a home group on Saturday night, or Sunday, which is the same day, right, in Judaism. And so what happened was Rabbi Akiva declared Bar Kokhba to be the Messiah. And Bar Kokhba did not deny it. And so this caused a wedge between Messianic Jews and other Jews. And so Messianics were not allowed, they couldn't bring themselves to fight in the rebellion against the Romans then. So this, of course, caused some animosity, right? So you have different splits happening from misunderstandings in different areas. And yeah, you're right, Constantine did not help things. Because Constantine, when he called the Council of Nicaea to kind of firm up things, there was a very antinomianistic spirit happening then. There was a lot of anti-Semitism. Jews were hated among the empire, and so were Christians to that point, right? So both were persecuted groups. But after the Council of Nicaea, it was not a good time to be a Jew. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. Tet comments, my own, at the heart of grace is Torah. Torah made richer by God's grace. God judges, Exodus 34:7, but gracious, John 3:16. Sure. Well, and if you can understand it, the Torah is grace. When we walk back through into Hebrew, one of the words which means grace is chesed, right? Chesed, Hebrew chesed, which, as I've shared before, it's loving kindness, yes, but it really primarily stems from this idea of clan loyalty. Being loyal to your family and your extended family and your extended family, which was Israel, right? And so whomever the king forgives, we must forgive. Whomever the king blesses, we must understand should be treated as blessed. Whomever the king hates, we should hate as well. Just like David HaMelech says in the Psalms, Et kol polei aven saniti. Sorry, I reversed the verb first. But I have hated all the doers of iniquity, right? Those who Hashem hates, he hated, right? Those who are intentionally doing idol worship, etc., this sort of thing. And so this is a concept of chesed applied in the broader group. This is why we must forgive those who sin against us, because we are demonstrating the concept of chesed, of clan loyalty. Just as God has forgiven us, we too are supposed to forgive. Right? Like Yeshua tells the parable, you remember about about one servant, and there's two, but the main guy's one. And the rich person to whom he owes money, when the servant begs, he forgives him. But then one of his other workers sees that servant throttling another guy. He's strangling him. Pay me what you owe me, right? And so the ruler then convicts this person. And so this is coming back to chesed, right? You have been forgiven. This other person is part of my kingdom too, part of my fiefdom, whatever it was. So you also need to demonstrate this clan loyalty that I've shown you. And so Torah, it's the ketubah, right? It's the marriage contract with our God. It's the love language of our God. So the way that we demonstrate chesed to him, the clan loyalty, is by keeping his rules like a good child. So that's, and like I said, really it doesn't get any better than Proverbs 31, that the torat-chesed aleshona, the torat-chesed, sorry, that the law of chesed is on her tongue, right? This righteous woman who's to be emulated. Yeah, a good verse, of course, 3:16. Thanks for that, Ted. John 3:16. Okay, so let's continue on here. Then they said, "V'nisrafa l'sreifa," and let us fire with fire. Let us burn with fire. Again, we have this. See the hay at the end, right? We have here, kind of it's like an exclamation point. Let's do it. The technical term is the cohortative, right? But you can think of it like an exclamation point. Let's do this thing. Let's do it. Okay. Let's burn. Let us burn this reifa with fire. Vatehi lahem halevena the oven. So this is very interesting. It says, and it will become or be for them the bricks. And this is an obscure use of lamed, so sorry for the Hebrew students. Like Evan, like stone. Right? And what's interesting is, in Mesopotamia, there was not, broader Mesopotamia rather than Israel. In Israel, we have lots of stones, right? Like you see the Jerusalem stone, right? This kind of whitish or off-whitish color that even in the States, they import the Jerusalem stone. and sometimes houses are built out of it or whatever. All over in Jerusalem, that's what's used, right? Because there was a nearby quarry that has a lot of this kind of stone. But in many of the places in Mesopotamia, they did not have the sheer quantity of stone or the right kind of stone for building. So archaeologists have learned that what was common instead was to cook bricks in a kiln. And in so doing, they would make a brick that was both strong and waterproof. And so the biblical account is very accurate here. It's correct. It's what happened in those areas. And certainly that's the same area where Babylon is, so it makes sense that they would be doing this. So they're going to cook the bricks, and they will become for them the brick like Evan, like a stone. Sarna comments that in the Enuma Elish, this is a pagan version that refers specifically to the founding of Babylon, it tells that for one whole year, they, that is the gods, molded bricks. Right? So even in the pagan literature, there's this high emphasis, right? Like the king's writing his name on the chief brick, the most important brick that's most prominent and seen, right? And you've got the, as they make this stairway to heaven, so to speak, or they attempt to reach God or the gods. Here we have a Hebrew wordplay. Cheymar haya lahem lachomer. Okay, so and the asphalt or the bitumen. Here, let's pull up the definition of this word. Became or was for them like chomer. Chomer is a raw material on the ground that's used for building, like a building material, kind of like mortar, or a material for making vessels, like sea vessels. Right? So you see it's the same consonants, Cheymar and Chomer, but they're different words, but it sounds pleasing in the Hebrew. Cheymar haya lachem lachomer. Right? Can you hear it? Kimchi comments that the Cheymor is the clay found in the earth of that region, and it was mixed into dough with water. The product, after kiln drying the bricks formed by the dough, is called chomer. These bricks were used in lieu of stones that were not found in that valley. Now I want to share with you from the Talmud, we have this wonderful phrase, this wonderful teaching, love all people. How so? This teaches us, by the way, you need to remember that these sayings of the Tana, of the old rabbis from around the time of Yeshua, they were not recorded until the 2nd century. Right? They were just memorized, a lot of this, passed down through oral tradition. And so you have to think about what happened in this time period. In this time period, we were slaughtered and kicked out of Israel. Yet still this teaching pervades to love all people, not hate all Romans, but love all people. How so? This teaches us that a person should love all people and not hate anyone. For so we find with the people of the generation of the dispersion, that's what the Torah is talking about now, that because they love one another, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, did not want to wipe them off the face of the earth, but instead He only scattered them to the four corners of the world. But the people of Sodom, because they hated one another, the Holy One, blessed be He, took them out of both this world and the world to come. Hebrew Olam Haba. So this is from Avot D'rabbi Natan, 12, paragraph 7. So very interesting teaching from our sages. That love, the power of love, of having this forgiving love to our neighbors, can save a person actually from destruction. And this segues nicely to the teachings of the Messiah. Because what does the Messiah tell us? The living Torah, the Memra, he tells us, forgive one another, right? As you have been forgiven. Right? And he makes clear that if we do not forgive others who sin against us, then we will not be forgiven either by our Heavenly Father. So it's a tough standard, but it's something that was developing over time, and here you can see the rabbinical tradition behind it also. And then it kind of goes on, it gives, if you can't love everyone, at least don't hate anyone, right? Which is also interesting. We have the famous Rabbi Hillel statement that do not do to anyone else that which is hateful to you to do. Right? I'll say that again. Don't do to anyone something that you hate being done to you. And of course, Rabbi Hillel, who was before Yeshua, we see that Yeshua agrees with Hillel, and he cleans up the phrase a bit, and he makes it a bit tougher. And he says, do to others the way that you would have them do to you. Right? So instead of not doing negative things only, he's agreeing with Hillel. He's giving him the nod, and he's adding to his teaching a little bit and saying, do to others. Like intentionally do good things to others the way that you would have them do to you. This is not contradicting Rabbi Hillel. He's pleoneo in the Greek. He's fulfilling, right? Which means he's filling up. So it's not like the Gentiles say, if you have this word to fill up, that means the other thing's been canceled. No, that's not how that's used. It means Rabbi Hillel's teaching has been added to, or rather filled up. It made clearer the real heart of the matter, the real gem of it, right? Just as Yeshua filled up the messianic prophecies about him and filled up the Torah and did not tear it down. Okay, let's get to some comments here. Dr. De Vera says, was it Nimrod who led the building of the tower? In our tradition, yes. Yeah, it's Nimrod. Nimrod's the one who does it. Very arrogant. Right? And of course, there's Midrash that Nimrod, he cast our father Avram into the fiery furnace because he refused to worship an idol, etc. Some of these stories, who knows if these Midrashes are true or not, if it really happened. But Nimrod was also a hunter, we're told, right? And the sages understand that hunters, in the Bible at least, someone who's marked as a hunter is a bad person, a wicked person, right? So we only have two people that we know were hunters in the Bible. We know that one was Esau, right? The one who despised the birthright, right? And righteous Jacob got it from him so that he could care for it properly. And then we have Nimrod. Those are the two hunters. And so from this, the sages determined that hunting is wicked, right? At least traditional hunting, right? There's certain types of hunting that's allowed, but it's not really hunting, right? Like using nets, for example, to catch fish. Using cages to catch an animal is considered okay. One of the reasons hunting is bad is because you could shoot an arrow at an animal and injure the animal, and it runs off, and you never find it, and it suffers for many days before it bleeds out or something like this. Dr. De Vera follows up that wasn't the bitumen that was used to cover the ark? Well, yes, bitumen is used on the ark, and it's also used on Moses's vehicle that his mother makes, right? She puts him also in an ark of sorts, a teva. It's also a teva, the same word that she makes out of the basket. She covers it with bitumen, yeah. Also this word, it's interesting. This word, chomer, it also means, okay, this is not Russian, but in Tagalog, suka, right? Vinegar, right? The Russian word means something bad. So, yeah. So it's interesting. So, chomer, the idea is because it bubbles up, right? It's frothing up. That's what the primary meaning of that verb, the verb that this noun comes from. It's something that froths up. There's also kinds of wines that are called chomer. Dr. Vera continues, above all, keep fervent in your love for one another because love covers a multitude of sins. First Kepha 4 verse 8, very nice. Yeah, very nice. Yeah, it's true. And we have also this covering up and this, the kofer to cover up. There's a lot of allusions to the chomer as an attempt to blot out what God sees in our sins. Daniel says they started shooting arrows into heaven from the top of the tower in the Book of Yasher. Oh, very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, so the Midrash, Sefer HaYashar, the Book of Jasher, some call it, Daniel sharing that they went to the top of the tower and they began shooting arrows up into the heaven. Very filthy imagery, if you think about it. Yehoshua is laughing because he understands Russian. All right. Hey, this is the end of part 2 of our 4-part series. Please make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell and give us a thumbs up. Leave a comment below, and I'll be sure to respond. Linegar. And as always, please pray for this ministry. Shalom, shalom.